we got a chance to have, let's say, Peter in Europe and in Rome, and that's why we invited him just to be together and, you know, have a conversation about design and about basically any interest. It's an Ask Me Anything. Basically, we can ask anything. I mean, be polite, you know, in the asking. For those who never had the chance to meet this guy, what can I say? I'm gonna say, let's say something pretty simple. He's one of the co-founder of Adaptive Path. They are like pioneers in user experience design. It's a company that were acquired, I think, 8 years ago. 8 years ago by Capital, by a bank. We can discuss about what's the future of design companies. and now he's a consultant, but also a trainer for many organizations, and he wrote a book about how to organize design companies or design teams, not just companies. So I leave to you if you want to say anything that is like about what you're doing right now. And my open-ended question is going to be, you are one of the pioneers of UX design, and it's like 2002. So what do you find interesting on how to do our job in the moment that we're living?
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Raffaele, for having me. It's been great. I've been visiting Rome the past few days. He's actually been a remarkable host. I'm here with my family, but they're resting back at our Airbnb while I'm doing this. I love being an excuse for the design and user experience community to come out wherever I am. So I'm going throughout Europe. We're doing this in Turin, doing this in Vienna and in Prague, people coming out to hang out. As Raffaele mentioned, I've been spending the last 3 or 4 years as a consultant, primarily focused on helping companies scale their design organizations. So I often work either in-house, or as a consultant, but like embedded, helping them recruit and hire and plan what it means to have. So right now my primary client it's a big bank in the United States. My client has 550 to 600 people in their organization, but there are other UX organizations, so there's about 1,200 people total overall. And I'm putting together what we're calling a career architecture. How can UX people advance in their career? Designers, researchers, content designers, what are their career paths? So that's one thing that I've been working on a lot. I also work with heads of design at a whole bunch of different companies, small companies, 10, 15 designers, all the way up to hundreds of designers, just helping them tackle their challenges. So I'm happy, in terms of Ask Me Anything, happy to talk about anything around designs and design organizations and scaling. And to answer your question, for me, so I am not a trained designer. My degree is in anthropology, like his. If I were to show you my slides, you would see that I am not a visual designer. And so for me, I very early on, like at Adaptive Path, very early on I gravitated more towards research and strategy, kind of the cerebral parts of design. I'm not a craft person, I'm not a technician. And so for me, what's most interesting right now about design is scale. I don't know, I'm curious to hear what you all have to say. It's part of the reason I wanted to do this, and to hear from you all, because in the United States, in UK, in Northern Europe, I have a client in Sweden, so I'm working with they're growing design teams. 20 to 40 to 80 to 150 to 300, scaling these design teams over the last 2 or 3 years. And so for me, I think the most interesting challenge for design isn't in the craft, isn't in the metaverse or crypto or Web3 or any of that stuff. And if that's what you want to ask me about, I won't have any good answers. For me, I think the most interesting challenge in design is, how do you scale design? How do you go from 20 to 200 and maintain quality, keep designers happy, make sure designers still have influence and impact as the organization grows. In a lot of companies, designers are seen as the, we talk about a seat at the table, is that a, yeah. So designers have been at the kids' table, and now designers want to go to the grown-ups table. And how do we show up at that table and be a contributor? So those are the kinds of things that I'm thinking about and what I think are some of the most interesting challenges. I'll stop there, because I could just keep talking, but I'll just stop there, and if there are questions, I'm happy to take them.
So I'm going to give this guy the chance to do the first question, then we're going to have like the Ask Me Anything.
I'll try. Thanks, Peter, to be here. The first question that I have really is, while you are, talking with organizations that are growing, right? So from, 10 to 150. Which are the most complicated things that you recognize as a pattern? Because I imagine, as designer and consultancy, we are working with different scale of organization, right? With, big organization of design that having so many intricate, partnership with design studio, right? While you, growing the organization, do you see the difficulty of the organization to grow as a design studio while partnering with different design organizations? I imagine a bank, right? A bank could have, 10 different design studios that are helping them with different products. And into the organization, they are trying to scale up. So it's not just scaling up the design studio, but even enlarging the partnership and dealing with scaling while partnering with design studio. Yeah. I don't know if...
I have answers, or responses at least. So yes, there are patterns. One of the biggest challenges as design teams scale inside these companies is, there's a few. As they grow, they have trouble maintaining their quality, their efficiency, their effectiveness, right? It's Metcalfe's law. As any organization grows, it gets more complex. You have more communication and coordination. And a lot of design teams, as they grow, don't know how to handle it. And so it just becomes noise. And there's a lot of effort, but no production. Nothing comes out. And so this is one of the reasons, we were talking earlier, yesterday about this, one of the reasons for design operations. So one of the patterns is you're seeing more and more companies building a design operations capability, because that exists to enable that communication, coordination, and help scale so that the teams can remain productive and not just kind of talking all the time but not doing anything. So that's one pattern. Another pattern that happens is because the scale is happening so quickly, I've seen teams go from 20 people to 250 in 2 years. So now you have this 2 years. Well, so this is part of digital transformations, right? Every company wants to be a software company now, wants to be a digital transformation company. If you're doing a digital transformation, not only are you hiring a bunch of engineers, software developers, you now need to hire designers to work with those engineers. And so you're going from 20 to 200 in 2 years. So now you have all these design directors, design managers, design leaders who don't know what their job is. Because 2 years ago, they were making wireframes and pushing pixels and executing on, they were in Figma. And now 2 years later, they have a team of 20 that they're supposed to run. And they don't know what that job is. They don't know how to do that. And so there's this gap where people just don't know how to be effective as a design leader. So I end up doing a fair bit of training and coaching, just trying to help these folks understand what their job is now as a leader, which was different than it was when they were a practitioner, because it's a totally different job. The job changes as you grow. So those are two obvious patterns. Another pattern, so in-house, it's less like design studios and more where you have design teams that integrate with product management and software engineering teams. most product managers don't know what their job, don't know how to do their job. And this isn't controversial. Marty Kagan, who is from the Silicon Valley Product Group, he wrote Inspired, Empowered. He's a product management guru, and he will say that most product managers don't know actually how to do their job. Most people with the job of product manager are behaving like a product owner, right? They're moving JIRA tickets, and they're checking boxes off on features. They're not doing product strategy. They're not really making decisions. And so one of the challenges that designers have in these scaling organizations is they're working with this very important function that doesn't quite know how to do its job often. If you're in a tech company or a newer company, those product managers are usually pretty good. But if you're working at a bank or an insurances firm or a healthcare company, they've taken these business analysts and they've said, you're now a product manager, and they don't know how to do the job. So those would be three patterns that I've seen over and over and over again as design has been scaling. We're going to run around, or are you going to ask the questions?
The idea is that we are using like menti.com, which
I
is like a
see.
platform, and as soon as we pop some questions from we are going to have like questions there.
Oh, okay.
It's going to be behind your back, so it's a surprise.
Okay, surprise.
And still that waiting maybe for some questions. Feel free if you want to write anything.
Just give her the microphone. Give her the microphone.
Sorry, breaking the ice because I'm not going to use Menti. Hi, Peter. So I have a question that it might seem pretty simple, but I guess the answer is not going to be that simple. Since you were talking about hiring designers, it's something I'm currently doing. I'm struggling a lot with understanding in depth what are the skills that we should look for that are not teachable, and what are the things that are teachable so they can learn on the job.
So I've for the last few years, I've spent a lot of time helping companies with their recruiting and hiring processes. How to find designers out in the world, and then the questions to ask them, how to talk to them, and how to discern if they're the right fit, right? With what you want when you're hiring, you're not necessarily looking for the best. There's no such thing as, there's no designer grades where there's like A designers, and you only want A designers. What you want is someone who will work within your context, right? And so, I guess to answer your question, my thought is, by and large, most of those things that we think aren't teachable are. So there's this concept of the growth mindset, Carol Dweck, right? Too often we approach recruiting and hiring or anything with a fixed mindset. You are who you are. And in design, we know you can learn your craft skills, so maybe you can get better at that. But your attitude, your personality, your whatever, that's fixed. I'd like to think that I'm an example of someone who's grown in the non-craft skills. When he first met me 20 years ago or so, 15, 20 years ago, I was much more of an asshole. Not mean, but I was very direct. And I was very, I'm not a naturally empathetic person. And so I didn't realize that when people were talking to me and asking me questions that I couldn't like engage back just what I thought, because it was just, it was a exchange of ideas. And some people take that hard, like I might criticize them or say something that they find offensive or critical. And that wasn't my intent, so I was like, well, you don't get me. And I've learned that's not appropriate. Especially as you become a leader, you need to be much more mindful of how you communicate and the impact that you have. And so I'm using this as an example of, even in those things that we don't think people can grow in, they can grow. It takes training, it takes practice, it takes coaching, it takes people around them to help them. And so that's a long answer. The short answer is, I don't think there's anything that people can't develop once they are made aware that this is something that's important for them to develop. They might not become the best. I'm still not the most empathetic, best communicator. And when I'm in a bad mood or I get upset, I can very quickly snap into being that asshole again. But I've become, you know, that's something I've worked on. And I think when we're recruiting and hiring, we tend to lock people in on how we see them today, and we don't give a lot of, we don't think about how they can grow into a more mature, more developed professional. And so I would encourage, you know, so I'm going to keep talking, sorry. What's important when you're recruiting is, what I see too often is when design teams are recruiting designers, they actually don't know what they're looking for. They're like, I want a senior designer. And that's about as much as they've thought about it. They're not, maybe I need them to be good in Figma, whatever that means. You need to sit down, you need to have a profile. Like, what are the skills? What are the capabilities? Like, what do we need at what level in their development? You need to have a pretty firm understanding so that when you see that person, you'll know, oh, okay, they're right. And then when you see that person, you'll also know with a good profile what matters, what they have to come with, and what you're okay if they don't have, because you know you can train them and grow them to develop some of those other capabilities. Okay, that's enough. Thank you.
There's a question behind you. Let's try, Antonello. Let's see if, yeah, there is. So the idea is still about teaching. Yeah, if you can. It's not, it's like it's a long, how to teach to those who are supposed to teach in the end. Continuous learning or mindset are beautiful, but I always struggle thinking about how we teach the teacher.
Was that from someone in this room?
It could be.
Okay.
No, it seems that someone abroad.
Okay. How are we supposed to
Train the trainer.
Yeah. So I'll do my best to answer this based on where I'm going, which is continuous learning matters. We want to grow, you know, so if you're more of a design leader, like I'm reading this as someone who is, I'm a design leader, I have a group of people in my organization that I'm helping bring up. Who's bringing me up? And something that I see, here's another pattern for you. Something that I see that's appalling is how few companies train their leaders to be better trainers. I'm doing that right now with one of the companies I support. But again, we'll give people management responsibilities. Here's 10 people to manage, 20 people to manage, and then not tell them anything about how to do that job. And so in terms of how to teach the teacher, my initial thought is give them resources where they can go and find support. I mean, so I mentioned I work with heads of design. Those are usually at companies where they have some funds, some money that they can spend on their own kind of development and growth. And that should just be standard for all design people, I mean all employees, but design leaders in particular, to find coaches and mentors and people who are senior to them, who they can learn from. They're out there, but you need to do the work to find them, and then you need to usually have some money to pay them. So, you know, that's my initial thought in terms of answering those, in terms of, like, I can keep learning, everyone can keep learning. So finding resources that where you can learn from.
Now, speaking about those like paths or their careers, we know many frameworks and models where you can have like a craft career and become, let's say, a principal designer, you know, specialized maybe in craft, or you can lead people, not just the craft, or maybe you're interested in leading the operations, as we were saying, you know. So we don't have like a single path.
Right.
You know, different people can also be, I don't know, at the top notch of their careers according to what they think they want to do. So how do we, I mean, in the design industry, we don't have like an agreement on how many paths do we have and how we can craft that, which is still like a 10 years debate about, so in the companies where you work, how can you, do you like work trying to design also the appraisal system and the paths for the people that are there? How do you deal with that? Do you do something that is like crafted for the ecosystem you're working in?
So I've done this a few times in a few different organizations, and if I have the time and a sponsor or something, like there's a baseline of that I think this community could develop. Sorry, my phone was ringing. Scam, likely, nothing important. Like there is an emerging set of standards for professional development, for user experience and design. One of you mentioned, do you want to grow as a manager? Do you want to become a manager and a director and a VP and recruit and hire and have people in your organization? Or do you want to grow as the phrase we use in the United States is individual contributor? You don't have anyone reporting to you, but you go from being a designer to a lead, to a principal, to a design architect. And a design architect, 20 years experience, usually very strategic designer, kind of a peer to a design director, but they just don't have any reports. That doesn't mean, because they don't have any reports, doesn't mean they don't wield a lot of influence. They wield it through their work, through strategic design work. So we're seeing that more and more, and that's one of the things, and every organization that I'm supporting, I'm usually helping them define what those two tracks are like. And then you mentioned almost a third, which is design operations, which is kind of a funny one, because design operations is usually, like, I'm now a design operations person, right? I started as a designer, but then I wrote that book, Org Design for Design Orgs, available at bookstores on the internet. And if I were to have a job, if someone were to hire me, it would be in design operations now. No one's going to hire me as a VP of design at a bank or something, managing a bunch of designers. I haven't done that for 3, 4, 5 years. But you might hire me as a VP of design operations to help figure out the organizational challenges, right? So sometimes you have designers who've made that shift, because that's where their head is. But now we also have professional project managers and program managers who are like, oh, that's way more fun than what I was, like the thing that I was helping program manage. You know, my co-author, Kristin Skinner, she would hire people from nonprofits, right? We have some folks here from not the FAO, but the other one. Right, but so from like places like the United Nations or nonprofits where you have a lot of people who are really good at program management, they're really good at operations and at coordinating. Maybe they're burnt out on trying to save the world, and they want a good job with fun people, and they're like, oh, can I do this with designers? Yes, you can. You don't need to know design to be a good design operations person. You'll need to learn it eventually, right? You might have to start kind of a level down as you learn the design aspects and then kind of grow back up. So that's an interesting one where we have people kind of coming from different backgrounds into it. So then the last thing, though, is what my experience is, as I've been doing this for a number of different companies, they're all starting to look the same. How you grow at a bank is the same as how you grow at a tech firm, is the same as how you're going to grow at a startup. Like we're seeing these patterns emerge. And while I'm on camera, I don't know which one is active right now. The best idea I have in this regard right now is for the IXDA, the Interaction Design Association, to invest in some initiative on creating, here's standard career paths for people who do this type of design work, and just publish something that's generic, right, kind of broadly applicable. And then, yes, companies would need to make it specific to their kind of context, but that's 10 to 25% is unique, and 75 to 90% is now becoming pretty standard across companies.
Feel free if you want to ask anything. Like, Maybe we have another question down. Wow. We used to measure anything nowadays, and then we get personal and team performances from those measurements. Is there something at work that shouldn't even be measured? So.
Oh no, I'm good. I got this one.
I'm good.
Performance evaluations, biannual. You know, you're going to fill out a form and you're going to get graded in some way of like, how are you performing at your job? Performance evaluations are a fiction. They're there to make HR people feel, and management leadership feel good about themselves and about their teams. You can't measure the work that we do in any meaningful way, at least at the individual level, because none of us works individually. Raffaele and I talk a lot about what you call football, what I call soccer. We can use football. How do you, Lionel Messi, perhaps the best soccer player in the world, how do you measure his performance? Or even someone more mid-level, who's a good, Tammy Abraham, no, that's not a good one. Who's a good one? So I'm I don't know if you guys watch basketball. So I'm from California, the Golden State Warriors. Draymond Green. His numbers are shitty. No points, no rebounds, no assists. His basic numbers are low. But you know he's an amazing performer. And for me, it points out, like, when we try to quantify the work we do, we're missing out on so much that's important. And so trying to isolate individual importance is kind of nonsense, especially in the work we do, because we're working with product managers, with engineers, with marketing people, with our clients. There's too much noise in order to do accurate or specific performance measurement. So I would argue, throw that out. Throw that out. I'm a hippie, I'm a socialist, I'm from California, so I just don't like capitalism and trying to like reduce people to numbers. This is one of the reasons I actually shifted into this kind of organization work, because designers don't do well when they have corporate HR tools applied to them. Performance measurement, 9-box evaluations, all this nonsense. Like, designers hate that shit. And it doesn't show us for who we are. So I'm trying to create this little bubble for designers to be the weirdos, to be creative, to do their thing in these corporate contexts that want to reduce everything to measurement and numbers, because it just doesn't make sense. So that's, I'm not a fan of measurement, you can tell. I'm a fan of helping people grow. You can still help people grow. You can have kind of a master-apprentice relationships, right? The more senior people help the more junior people understand how to do their job better and how to grow, sure. You can hear from their colleagues how it is to work with that person, sure. Like that social kind of response. Relative. Yeah, the 360, you know, in terms of how is that person doing, sure. But are we going to like measure ourselves on how many wireframes we produced in a quarter? Or no, we're going to measure ourselves on the products that we ship, but so many people were involved in whatever it was that shipped. How do I say that I'm responsible for that? We need to help organizations figure out how to measure at a team level. And that's hard, but that's the only measurement that I would actually consider valuable. Much like thinking about football, you know, you measure at a team level. you know, that's the measurement that matters, not at the individual level.
Interesting. Maybe something connected with that, before we got another question, is the, speaking about the teams, and I had the chance to speak with many organizations for like an academic paper, trying to understand how do they organize team and divide teams, especially like in corporate, so in big organizations. Like if you say, let's say, do we know that Spotify and Zalando or Netflix, how many teams they have, and the team is not just like a group of people. They should have like a goal together, something that they want to achieve together. So is that the perimeter of a team is like the touch point is the product, is a feature, is, I don't know, a result. How can, and different organizations, they just, you know, divide and imagine like the meaningful teams or not so meaningful. And still we have maybe many teams that they deal with, I don't know, IT products, like you are the application team. And what's your job? I have to do the application. For what?
Right. I'm trying to think if, yeah, we're going to keep this conversational. I have slides, but I don't want to pull them up and
Up to you.
So I think a lot about teams and team dynamics. So I think the title of this Ask Me Anything is the atomic unit of design is the team.
Is the team.
So that's in response. So I'm curious how it's working here in the United States for the last 10 years because of the Spotify squad model or because of the Amazon 2 pizza teams. You get these small 6, 7, 8 person teams with one designer, one product manager, and then 5 or 6 engineers. And I hate that. I hate that because you get the lone designer becomes this, it's hard to be that one designer. You're the only one who is the designer. Nobody else understands what you're doing. You're constantly trying to explain why you're making your decisions. The engineers, there's 5 or 6 of them, so they've created a little group. They understand each other. They can outnumber you. And so so I have this talk, the atomic unit of design is the team, which is we need to pull those designers out of these little teams and into their own design team. 4, 5, 6, 7 designers working together across product teams so that the designers can be a team. You can have different skills, right? If you have one designer embedded in a team, they have to be a great visual designer, interaction designer, user researcher. They have to do it all. But if you have a design team, you can have some who are better at information architecture, some who are better at interaction design, and they can complement one another's strengths and weaknesses. But now you have to figure out how to organize that team. And what you're starting to see slowly more of is organizing by customer types and their journeys. So the example I use, is from e-commerce, right? You're going to buy something on the internet. So you might have, you know, I'm researching my purchase. I'm looking at products. I'm comparing products. I'm putting things in my shopping cart. I'm making a purchase. You might have the post-purchase experience, right, of reviews, or you have to return it, customer service, right? And you would have design teams, a design team that's looking at this from a journey lens, end to end, as opposed to, like so I worked at Groupon, which was an e-commerce site, and we would have designers kind of embedded at each of those stages, but they weren't talking to each other. So the end-to-end journey was broken. So instead, have designers work on that end-to-end journey and interface with engineers and product people who are focused on the different stages of the journey. That's my bias. You're starting to see that from some product people are talking more about organizing by customers. So it's shifting. Never organize by technology. You don't want to have iOS designers and Android designers and web designers. Like, that doesn't make sense anymore. Maybe engineering, but not even that. Like, those engineers you want to have focused on an experience, primarily. You might have what are called platform engineers, right? They might be specialized in certain platforms. But by and large, you want to organize teams around customer value and what the people who are using the service are getting from it. That's my belief in terms of how to organize.
Thanks. Yeah, I have thoughts about the value before jumping on that, because I think it's interesting. We try to embed in our work the multidisciplinary team, right? So people like team of 5, 6, information architect, user research, visual designer. It seems to work.
Well, so you're at 5th Beat, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Agencies. So this is one of the things I learned at Adaptive Path. No design agency has individual designers doing work on their own. That would be insane. And design agencies are set up to deliver the highest quality design. That's the only purpose in their existence. And so why don't we learn from design agencies that you organize in these design teams? Sorry.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. And our thought is really day by day is to try to push designer outside the output creation, more on the outcome creation, right? And that, I think, you know, the performance level is not to quantify by numbers, but by quality, like qualitative, you know, side of the outcome. Even, you know, thinking about micro moments, right? Even, you know, in e-commerce, you take 5 teams, they're working on 5 different micro moments. If you try to merge them into just outcome, I think the value would be much higher. I don't know if, you know, you are struggling with that in your organization that you're jumping on. If you see that designers are more willing to push towards the output, maybe into the junior level, I don't know. I think it's a big conversation on that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this is a common topic where as these design teams are growing within banks and insurance firms or travel, yeah, as these design teams are growing, what's often happened is that design has been turned into a production function where someone else is just like, just build this thing. Don't think, just build it. And I'm usually brought in because, this bank I'm supporting, they have a new leader, and she's trying to get the team out of production only. Designers will always be doing some of that execution work, but get them out of production only and into more outcome orientation. I'm assuming, I shouldn't assume. So the concept of the double diamond of design, you have the first diamond and the second diamond. So designers have all been second diamond, execution in these companies. We're trying to get them into the first diamond of definition. And it's a trick, or not a trick, it's a challenge, because that first diamond that's where product people are like, no, that's mine. Only I get to do that. But what I've seen is if we get our more senior designers, more mature designers, who can engage with product leaders and engineering leaders as peers, that becomes this opportunity now for designers to be part of the initial conversation about what are the outcomes we want to drive toward. Don't tell me what to build, tell me where you want to go, and I'll help figure out how we're going to get there. So we're starting to see that shift happen more, but it was, at least in the United States, it was funny. You know, 10, 15 years ago, when I was helping run Adaptive Path, there was this understanding of strategic design, and I felt there was this kind of wave up of designers as strategists, and you had Tim Brown from IDEO talking about design thinking and all this stuff. And then, though, as design moved in-house and started scaling, design became this production role again. But now, as some of those leaders from 10, 15 years ago are running 100, 200, 500 person teams, right? They've been doing this a long time, and they remember what strategic design looked like, and now they have authority. They're bringing strategic design back and getting design earlier into the conversation and helping define those outcomes and not simply responding to outputs. So that shift is starting to occur, but it's a slog. Yeah, it's a slog.
We have like 9 questions or something like that.
Okay. So, just as in-house designers choose whether to be managers, what might be the opportunities, risks of design consultants with a different path for those willing, able to build client capabilities? So I'm a design consultant, but I don't think a lot about the world of design consultancies anymore. So I'll let you answer that question.
The idea...
Ask Raffaele anything.
Yeah, this is me. So the idea here is that when you work with an organization, like you don't have to have those boundaries like, you know, I'm the consultant, you are the in-house designer, and we're going to have, let's say, our rituals, and then everyone is going to work by himself or herself. Basically, the team, it could be like a project team or a product team or a service team. The team is the team. You're working, like you're part of that, you know, ecosystem. And the ecosystem is not just like the walls and brick and mortars of the organization, like a client, the team is anyone that is like part of that. So even like all the companies that they work for, the tech companies, all the companies that are around. So what could be interesting to define is how do we design the governance of a team that is like made by different people, that they have maybe managers in different organizations with a different culture. So for example, working with a company who has like a pretty, let's say, old-fashioned culture, they want to have, I don't know, a 3 weeks or 4 week plan. They don't accept the idea that we are going to have like a plan from Monday to Friday, and then next Monday we're going to discuss the plan. And so when you have like the mindset and the culture that of the organization you're working with are going to have a huge impact on if you are able to do like a work together, or if you do like a work as a consultant to say, hey, I did mine, but I don't know how to have an impact in a governance that is pretty different from the governance that they have.
Yeah. My initial thought about that, I like the word governance in this context, because I think too often, whether it's just in-house or between clients and like consultants and their clients, we don't spend enough time up front setting ground rules and just understanding where we're coming from. We just throw people together and expect them to start like executing and working as if they're some already well-oiled machine. I see this all the time in-house, where teams are constantly changing. New designers working with one another, new designers working with different engineers and different product people, and they're just thrust together and told to go make stuff. It takes a long time for a team to gel. It can take 3 months, 6 months, 9 months to learn how to work together. And then just as a team figures out how to work together, they're broken up and put on other work. And so I think being very intentional at the outset about how you're going to work together, again, whether it's with between a client and a consulting company and their client, or in-house, is essential and too often overlooked as a stage.
We have, let's say, more than 10 questions. Let's go to the first. Antonello. Still about the career partners. What advice? We want advices. People, yeah. And two different advices.
Yeah.
From the beginning.
Yeah. So advice for a designer at the beginning of their career path. It's really, this is...
Negroni, please.
They weren't ready for me at the bar, and I ordered a Negroni. I ended up getting a beer. I'm doing fine. At the beginning of their career, so I do a lot of work thinking about career paths for user experience and design people when I work in-house. And that is my persona, is the designer early in their career. Because it's not at all clear what the path is in the work we do. I have an anthropology degree. I stumbled into user experience. I've just kind of fumbled along. And I feel a little, I don't want to say sorry for it, because it's amazing work to do, but it's daunting, right? If you imagine you're 25 years old and you're like, how do I make sense of design, user experience, visual design, interaction design, IA, user research, content design? Do I want to be a craftsperson, a manager? Do I need to learn business? It's just overwhelming. And so for that early career designer, the first thing I'd say is it's okay. We've all been there. You'll figure it out. I would also say it's starting to get more mature. So there are some grooves that have been kind of worn into the rugs and some paths that you can take. And to work with, hopefully you're in an organization where you have a manager who can help you. That's not always the case, but hopefully. And be very explicit with that person, like, I'd like to grow. I don't know exactly how. These are the things that I'm interested in. Think about, do you love the practice and craft of design? Is that what you really are passionate about? Are you more of a strategic, cerebral person, and maybe that's a direction? Like, reflect on your own desires, and then share that with a manager, and hopefully they can help chart a path forward for you. If you don't have that, and a lot of people don't, whether it's the IXDA or other professional groups, you can often find mentors. So find a mentor and get someone who's willing to engage with more junior folks and who can help you understand these opportunities ahead of you. The other thing I would say to someone early in their career, there's a lot of whining about design or about whatever, like in every, it's amazing. Designers, there's only more and more need for them. There's not enough designers. You will always have a job. If there's supposedly maybe a recession about to happen with inflation, and I don't know what I don't know what the news is here in Europe. In the United States, everyone's freaking out. Tech company valuations are going down, layoffs. We started Adaptive Path in 2001. The NASDAQ was never lower after the dot-com bust. We never didn't have work. There is always more work for designers than there is designers to do the work. I have never, in 20 now years, at least, I have never seen a situation where there isn't more work than people to do the work. It might not be exactly the work you want, right? That's what you get with the peaks and valleys, is you can't be as choosy when times are a little tough, but you can get good work and good paying work. I have never seen in a market where there isn't good work. So that's something I would say to an early career designer, is like, you've chosen a great professional path.
Yeah, you're in the right moment.
Yeah, there's no bad moment for that. But it is going to be confusing in terms of figuring out how to navigate that. So find a mentor who can help you. Now, for a designer at an advanced point of their path, I mean, I think it's similar. In terms of finding someone who can help you think through your passions, your motivations. Hopefully, if you're later on, 10 years, 15 years, you have a sense of what it is you're about. I guess for that designer, what I'd say is be true to that sense. Too often I see designers who think that in order to grow, in order to advance in their careers, they have to become a manager. And they have no desire to be a manager, but there's just this assumption, oh, I guess I have to manage. Don't do that. You don't have to be a manager to grow in your career. At least in many places now, there are alternate paths. So think about where you get your passion, your motivation, what your heart desires, and you can probably make that work. And don't be afraid, even if you're a late career designer, to shift, right? I went from being essentially kind of a design strategist to a design operations guy. And I did that, 20 years into my career, right? You can, if you're no longer feeling the love at what you're doing, don't keep doing it. Find that thing that you can do that can rekindle that flame. I think those opportunities are there for us. Are we just going to keep looking back?
Check.
Okay.
Check.
Answer, check. Oh.
Elephant in the room. Wow, thrilling.
So what if the expectation of a designer does not match the expectation of the organization in terms of the future of the role of the designer?
I'm sorry.
Quit fifth beat. I'm assuming this is a... No,
Let's close.
No. So this is one of those things that 10, 15 years ago, when I was more of an asshole, younger and more glib, I'd say, quit your job. Just go get a new job. And that's a little bit true. But I've come to recognize, as a middle-aged white man, that I have been the recipient of a lot of privilege. And it's not as easy for just anybody to do what they want and make a career out of it. So in a situation like this, you only have two choices. You have to quit and find a place that matches your interests, right? Or you have to figure out how to help this organization understand what you believe about design. And so that's change management, that's evangelism, that's education, that's
literacy.
Managing up, right? You might be a designer, maybe you're reporting to a product person who doesn't understand all that you could be doing and wants you to just turn that crank and make Figma assets. And you're like, no, but I want to do research, I want to do strategy. And so you need to just keep working in that conversation. This is a good opportunity to talk about design leadership, right? This is a challenge, this is a design leadership challenge. It's not just a designer trying to help their organization understand them. This bank that I'm supporting, this team has 600 designers. The woman who runs this team is still having to educate everyone at her level, SVPs in this global bank, of what design is. If I was shocked. So she presented to her boss, this head of product for this 200,000 employee bank. It's a big bank. She presented to her boss how design works. She showed the double diamond. You have to get really basic, very simple, to communicate what we do to people who should know better and they don't. So like this job that this question is addressing never ends. At all levels, we're educating that next level up, unless if we're the CEO. At all levels, we're educating that next level up of what we can be doing and what more value. This is also around that outcomes versus output, right? Don't tell me what to make. Tell me what you want. Tell me the impact you want to see realized, and I'll tell you how I can get there. You need to keep, and you're going to have to keep having that conversation over and over again. That's one of the challenges of the work we do as designers in a field that is still relatively new. I mean, it's exploded it's exploded in the last 10 years, it's exploded in the last 5 years, it's exploded in the last 3 years, like it keeps exploding. And that means there's a lot of people who still don't know what we do that we have to continue to educate. It's not a mature practice yet within organizations. So yeah, just you're gonna have to do that work. Now, you might say, I don't have the energy, the time, the passion, I want to just do great design work. Then you find an organization that is more aligned. And right now, I'm assuming, even with layoffs, it's still a pretty good time to be a designer looking for work. There's some flexibility there.
Yeah, I agree with that. Anyone?
In the room, or do we?
In the room.
In the room. Yeah. Okay, we got.
Come on.
Oh yes, you can be the
Okay, as per protocol, actually I also posted it in Menti. There was too long a question for Menti, so I have to read it now. Sorry.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so this is a question about funding models.
Okay, let's do it.
Change this out. Okay. Are there any funding models that are more suitable to sustain the growth and the impact of design teams? Like, for example, you have an organization with a decentralized funding models with money coming in with projects, designers assigned and then, disbanded. Or you have another one with a more stable centralized funding that can sustain the growth over time. But does that demonstrate impact if you have to shrink down?
Right.
Thank you.
This is one of those things I didn't understand for the longest time. Working in a design firm, I didn't worry about funding models. And then when I went in-house, I worked at tech companies. There's no funding model at Meta, Facebook. There's no funding model at Google. There's a product, and they need to hire people, and they hire people, and those people, and somewhere money came to to hire that group, but that's the funding model, is we're launching a product, we need people to launch it, and there's no funding model. Funding models are, they're archaic, I say, in the city of Rome, right? They're old, they're legacy, that's from how business was done a long time ago, and banks still use them. So the banks I support often have a funding model, right? This line of business gives the design team here's 5 million euro, I want 10 designers that are mine, that I get to do with as I want for a year, and then who knows what happens next year. That's ridiculous. That's a terrible way to handle this stuff. I mentioned Marty Kagan earlier, because it's not just designers. So Marty Kagan is consulting, or his company is consulting with my client as well. And this concept of funding model came up. And in the context of digital transformation, right? So he's often brought in to help companies embrace this digital transformation. And one of the things that Marty pointed out, he did an Ask Me Anything, kind of like this. One of the things that Marty pointed out was, when you're doing digital transformation, the easy part of digital transformation is getting designers and product people and engineers to work together in new ways. Doing product discovery, working as a collaborative team. However hard you think that is, that's the easy part. The hard part of digital transformation is getting your CFO to change how they do funding models, to get your marketing folks to change how they interact with the product team, to get HR to change their recruiting and hiring practices to support this new way of doing product. Changing the product functions is easy. Changing the rest of the organizations is what's hard. And something Marty pointed out in this interview that he was doing is that this is why he says that he's never has seen a digital product transformation succeed that didn't have the CEO involved. Because this, as an active sponsor, not, again, for the product teams, but because the CEO needs to tell the CFO, we're no longer doing a project-based funding model. We don't fund projects, we fund products, we fund teams. We're not having a product marketing, marketing communications team that's waiting for something to make ads about. We're going to change how we do marketing, and product marketing is going to work differently now. So you need the CEO to get those other functions to behave differently as well. So that's a long answer. The short answer is no project-based funding model. That's death. You need to fund people, long-term, however you figure it out, like in a legacy organization, the best kind of, I don't know about compromise, but way to do it is essentially to levy an internal tax. Every line of business just contributes some percentage of their funds to design. And it goes in a pool, and then the design team, given a set of outcomes, not outputs, the design team given a set of outcomes that they exist to support, figures out how they're going to deliver value to the organization through their relationships with these teams. But yeah, you got to move away from project-based funding. It's too transactional because nothing's ever finished. A project-based funding assumes that's why it's legacy, right? You used to be able to launch something and then you were done. Now it's software. Software is never done. So you need a funding model that recognizes the reality of like you just keep doing it forever. Any other questions? Wow, my voice. Questions? Questions in the room? Should we go to the board? Let's go to the board. Oh. The real question follows. Wait. Follows. Is there a next one? How to manage a CEO of a fast-growing company who before says that design team is in charge to lead on DevOps. I can see the desperation into that. And then acts completely the opposite, telling the devs what they have to do and win. It's the same as for me, it's the same kind of response as that one where the person's like, what I think my job is and what my leader thinks my job is are two different things. You have to educate. Like, I don't have a good answer. There's no simple answer. You're in a difficult situation. Whoever asked this question, if you're in the room, you're in a difficult situation, especially because for some reason, in an otherwise democratic society, we've decided companies are little kingdoms, and the CEO just gets to do whatever the hell they want. which is ridiculous, but that's the reality. And so if you've got a CEO who isn't listening, who isn't empathetic, who isn't seeking input, who isn't willing to delegate responsibilities, but instead thinks it's their job to make all the decisions and to be the visionary, there's only so much you can do. You can try to educate, you can try to evangelize, but it's, you know, you're kind of stuck if you've got a CEO with a very specific way of working, and you know, if the education that you're doing isn't working, there's not much more you can do. I wish I could give you happy answers with silver bullets, but they often don't exist. Sorry. Any questions from the audience? Okay. As a teacher leader, what do you appreciate and value the most from people who are taught and led by you in a team? So this is specific to me. People who will push back, because that's how I engage, right? So this is one of those things that I had some challenges with earlier, because I would push back, and often people are not comfortable when someone pushes back on them. They take that as an attack. I don't take that as an attack. So when I'm working with a team, if things aren't working out well, I want people to push back on me and to help us all get better. So that's that. But my point there is that's very specific to me. And I think kind of another way of thinking about this question is engage your leaders on how they want to engage. Like, make that a dialogue. Be upfront. Don't try to guess. You're not you don't have ESP. You're not a mind reader who can somehow divine what your leader wants necessarily. Have a conversation and find out what they are looking for from you. Hopefully it's not just someone to do whatever they tell them. But yeah, for me, I value folks who speak up, who are engaged. I try to have as many different viewpoints represented. Who don't take, so there's this, it's important to kind of be serious about the work, but not be serious about yourself, right? Not take it personally if things aren't going well, but care about the quality of, oops, Siri wants to join. Who, you know, so doesn't be offended or whatever, like if you're critiquing work and they don't get all worked up and offended. But that their interest is in making the work better. Let's talk about the work, not kind of making it about how I feel. Now, you also want to be respectful of how people feel, right? And there's a nuance there. But for me, it's someone who can really engage in that conversation. Any questions in the room? Do you have a question?
Questions? Don't be shy.
Ask me anything.
You know, what he's saying, you know, the way we embrace conflict and the way we are able to create a safe space for conflict is so relevant. When you see like a design project, you know, without any conflict, maybe the conflict is hidden.
Yeah.
Maybe people they're not speaking. They are not like trying to, you know, have a conversation, a real conversation,
Right,
a transparent
right.
conversation.
Yeah, this is something I think a lot about because great design is born of not conflict, but tension, disagreement. If everyone just nods their head, it's probably mediocre. And you want people to speak up, but in order for things like critique or other kind of practices to work, this is why team dynamics is so important. If you throw together 6 people who've never worked before with one another, they're not going to, and just tell them to start executing. They're not going to be honest or candid, right? Radical candor, I'm assuming, is a concept. They're not going to be candid with one another because they don't want to make people mad because they don't know anything about one another. So they're going to be easy and, oh yeah, that's great, that's fun, yeah, good. And so that's why it's so important for the first, a new team to spend a week, 2 weeks, just getting to know one another and getting to learn about one another. And as part of that, developing a respect for one another. Raffaele mentioned purpose. A team without a purpose is simply a collection of individuals. But once you have a purpose, now you have this thing that those 5, 6, 7 people are all working on together. Now they have a higher order, something meaningful. With that purpose, now if they critique each other, they know they're doing it not because they're picking on each other, but because they have a shared understanding of where they want to go. But you got to do that work at the outset to build that foundation of purpose and trust so that you can then kind of get in the mix and be candid and be critical and not take offense because you know it's about making the work better. And we don't spend enough time at the outset doing that, and so then our work is blunt instead of sharp when we get to the end.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing, talking about leadership, right? So dealing with lots of designers that have different backgrounds, and they're struggling with talking with different kind of people in the business or development, and it's connected with a couple of questions, right? If the organization doesn't understand me, maybe you are talking with a different dictionary. So most of the time, as mentioned, I see designers that know all the answer, or because they think they are good, they know all the business logics, right? And at the same level, how do you as a leader driving
Is he
this...
talking about Gabriele right now?
Sorry?
No, okay. Sorry.
It's fine. Yeah, how do you as a leader, like driving this designer to have different conversation with different people outside their different background, different mindset?
This is one of those areas, so this is one of those areas where as consultants, we kind of have an advantage. Like, so having started as a consultant with Adaptive Path, at least in terms of my serious business career, because you very quickly learn that you have to speak your client's language. If you start coming at them with your own jargon, they're going to look at you funny. And as consultants, you learn in order to make an impact, you literally are just listening for their words, their language, and then you start feeding that back to them, and then they're like, oh, you've been listening, you understand me, and then they relax. They recognize that. What's ironic is when you're in-house, and you're a designer working with the business people inside, you often don't end up learning that behavior, because you kind of think it should just come with you. But the business people can start dismissing the designers as, the designers, they just want to make it pretty or cool or whatever. They don't understand my needs as a business person and what I'm trying to accomplish. And so, this is something I talked with Erica Hall about. We are really, this community is really good. We are the best at having empathy for people we've never met on the other side of the screen, and really bad at having empathy for the person next to us who is a product manager. Right? We're like, that asshole is making my life miserable. Fuck him or her. But we're like all about the user, and we got to do everything for the user. And this poor schmuck, this asshole product manager, if you bothered to talk to them about their life, you'd learn, oh, they've got their boss yelling at them. They've got the engineers saying, we can't build that. They've got someone in the business asking for certain results. They've got the marketing people asking for, we need dates. When are you going to launch? We need to have our campaign. So you have to recognize, like, they're in their world of hurt, and the reason you're not getting what you need from them isn't because they're necessarily bad people. It's because they're dealing with their own stuff coming at them. And so for designers, we need to use that power of empathy internally and listen to, ask our colleagues questions. What is your concern? What's going on with you? Hear them, feed that back, make sure they understand that we understand where they're coming from. And then again, they'll calm down. They'll say, okay, we have shared goals. And now we can collaborate. And now I can put my guard down. And I don't have to worry that you're going to do some designer thing that is going to hurt my business, because I now know that we're trying to do, we have the same, and again, that's where the purpose statement is so important, because we have the same kind of goal that we're aiming for. So it's really about shutting up about your double diamond and personas and whatever it is, your user research and your methodologies, and like they don't, no one cares about that. They don't care about that. Shutting up about that stuff, at least at the start, and listening. And what is it that you need? What is it that you want? Try to understand their perspective, and then framing what you do in that context. And then they'll be, and then those folks will be happy. That's what, when I mentioned the double diamond to help this head of product figure, understand design, that's what that conversation was to situate design in this broader product context so that the leadership could appreciate the role that design can have in being part of that larger team that's delivering value, as opposed to some black box off in a corner that you feed requirements to and you get specifications kind of spit out from it.
Totally agree with that. Like we spent like 2 days to do just a slide for the Steve Blank, the ideas about it was something maybe you can do like the first year at the university with the idea of customer like development, just to fit that idea of customer development to the big corporate process, to show them and to show the managers that what we were doing was different rather than they do, but not a game.
Exactly.
But not a game. Yeah. And even, why are you spending, say, 2 days to do a slide, putting together like approaches, is trying to find, the common ground so that we can shut off the defensive side of, the collaboration.
Right. No, so what you're demonstrating is what I would very generally refer to as design leadership, right? Leading others, helping others understand. And the thing about design leadership is it's all talking. It's relationships. It's influence. It's not the craft. That's important, but design leadership is so much about the relationships that you're building with others, which is something, you were talking like that's someone who's not working on the relationship. They're so focused on the content of the problem. I have the best solution. You should all just want my best solution, not realizing that that's maybe half the work at most, and the other half is helping other people understand why that's the best solution. Yeah. Oh, we have a hand raised. How are we on time?
We are 20 minutes to the conference.
Okay.
So it's going to be a kind of a coming out, because I wrote a question that was not clear before.
Oh, okay.
So I'm going to repeat it
That's
again.
okay.
Also because you addressed it again, it's about the fact that if you are a consultant, you are kind of expected, and I was like, since the beginning, I saw junior design being expected to be able to do evangelize and advocate and do client management and all these kind of things on the top of being a designer. And I find it I start to question whether that's similar to you being a designer, the seniority, and you're expected to be able to manage people. But then you end up doing the distinction between being a design manager or individual contributor. So the unclear question of before was, well, should design consultants have a different career path or a different training as well, if they are client-facing, let's say, to summarize it, client-facing there's consultants that focus on clients and building capabilities and advocating for them, also maybe within the organization, not just clients, or those that actually just do the work well and they make sure that delivery is done. I hope now it's clear.
No, it is clear. It's interesting. I'm looking off. I don't want to look at people when I think, so I look off and the gears are turning. My general thought is that every designer needs to be good at communicating about their work. You can't just focus on craft, or you're essentially kind of leaving design and becoming an artist, essentially. And that's a path, but that's not what we're doing. If if you're not developing that ability to talk about your work, you're gonna hit a ceiling. No matter how good you are with the details and the fine points, you're probably gonna tap out, max out at a mid-ish level. And so everybody, consultants or in-house designers, need to learn how to talk about their work. This is something, so in these career paths that I make for these companies, there's usually a skills taxonomy. And there's the design skills, interaction design and visual design, but then there's professional skills, and communication is one of those skills. And it's design communication. So how do you talk about your work? How do you explain your decision making about the designs so that other people understand it? And whether or not they agree with you, they understand where you're coming from. But you have a clear rationale, a point of view that other people can appreciate. And then over time, it's less about decision making, and it's more about persuasion, influence, storytelling, presentations. How can you bring people along on your journey? That's a designer skill at a more senior level, whether you're a consultant or in-house. So I think every designer needs to figure out how to develop that, or they'll reach a ceiling if they're not building that skill set, that capability to talk about their work. With the only kind of super rare exception in a consultancy would be if you could be like this, just, you know, the like mad scientist of some methodology, and you're not about the client stuff, but you've figured out, you've cracked some nut about how to do a thing. Right? You're Brad Frost inventing atomic design, and you've broken it out, and you're still communicating in order to get others to understand, but you're not client communicating, right? You're like, but that's pretty rare to be that kind of genius thought leader who can hyper focus on some practice or method and not worry about the client communication kinds of stuff. By and large, all of us need to learn how to build our communication skills in order to continue to advance in our careers. Does that answer your question? Excellent. Any other hands internally? Or do you want to...
We're going to make space for you. We have, let's say, 15 minutes. So
Think of questions. Let's go to the board. What do we got? What's next? We said, ask me anything. I have never designed my own career path. I'm sure in part this is a function of privilege. Partly it's because 25 years ago when I started doing this work, it wasn't clear there was no career path for definitely what I'm doing, but even user experience generally. Maybe you could be a UI designer at a software company in the mid-90s or something like that. But for me, I've always been lucky that I've kind of been able to just lean and follow an inclination. So like I started as a web developer because that was my one marketable skill in 1996. But I worked at a design firm and I'm like, oh, I like this. So I pivoted into interaction design because I'm not a visual designer, but I could do workflows and wireframes. And then a few years later, I started Adaptive Path with some friends. So I didn't have to worry about a career path because it was my company. And then when I left that and I became an executive, I kind of jumped the queue and became an executive because at Adaptive Path, I'd grown, right? I'd recruited and hired and built a design organization. And that was now a skill that people wanted in-house. And so I started doing that in-house. But then I'm not wired, I think, to be a VP of design, to run a team of 40, 100, 200 internally. I like I'm a little more cerebral. I like I wrote, co-wrote org design for design orgs because I like to play with those concepts and those ideas and in those space models and frameworks and that kind of thing. That's what excites me. So I wrote a book. So one way to choose your career path is write a book on what you want to do for the next 10 years. And when you put that book out, people will then hire you to do that work. People could read my book for €30, or they can hire me for way more than that. And a lot of people will hire me for way more than that for stuff that much of which is already in the book. Anyway, so I've been fortunate enough that I've been able to kind of write my own career path, I guess. That's how I've handled it, but I don't think that's necessarily accessible to to everybody. But if you can, I would say do it. It's great. That's why I'm able to spend 5 weeks traveling in Europe with my family, where most of the people I know can only get 2 weeks vacation because they have to work for a company. But I work for myself, so I can choose when I go on vacation. So I am privileged. I will own that. Any other questions from the audience, or should we? Let's go to the big board. We did the funding models. Okay, answered. In your experience, what is the relation between tech, design, ethics, and innovation? Which should lead, and when, and why? So tech, so tech is the least interesting of these, right? Tech is plumbing. This is my controversial statement. By and large, technology is plumbing. Like, when we're building a building, we don't lead with plumbing and structural engineering and worrying, but for some reason we've decided because engineers are hard to hire or programming seems like this black art, we need to lead with tech. I don't lead with tech. So I would set that aside immediately. Because you said my experience. So I'm going to talk from my point of view. Design, ethics, and innovation, I think you can orient around this idea of engaging with people, with humans, humanities. So my business is called Humanism at Scale. I don't use that publicly, but because I believe in embracing our humanity, not human-centered design or user-centered design, but embracing our humanity and really leaning into that in the work we do and making sure the work we do is responsive to humans and human practices and human needs and human desires in all of its variety. And so the ethics part becomes, I think, actually they almost need to lead with ethics, right? To answer the question, because we're leading with what does it mean to be I want to say a good kind of person and engage with people in good faith, with honesty, with care, with grace. I would start there and then worry about innovation and design in terms of how do we generally the idea of design. I'm going to get all Herbert Simon here if anyone wants to go way back, right? Herbert Simon was a professor at CMU and was an early design theorist in the 50s, 60s, 70s. And I forget his exact definition of design, but it's basically design is shaping our environment to make things a little better, right? It's always improving and trying to make things better. And that's the act of design, no matter what it is. It's that shaping for improving outcomes. But what are those outcomes that we are driving towards should rest on this understanding of people and kind of an ethical sensibility, sentiment, as opposed to, the reason I don't like to start with tech is tech tends to be tech for tech's sake. Like, we can make a thing, but should we? I want to start with the should we before, the metaverse. We've invented the metaverse. Go figure out what to do with it. Okay, I don't want to start with that. If my solutions end up with, or if my innovation in ethics and design lead me to want to create something like a metaverse in order to solve a real problem, awesome. But to have this shell of the metaverse and to be like, okay, now what? Feels backwards to me. Yeah.
Yeah, the problem with ethics is that you said make it better. the definition of better is socially constructed, and especially in the complexity theory, we know that we explore tensions, as you said before, where maybe what is good for someone is not going to be good for the other part. So how do we shape strategy decisions that are not design patterns or the execution decisions where you can have a best practice or a good practice? So when you are going to use ethic as a compass, are you going to work for that company who works with that other company, and then the end of the chain, I don't know, they realize something, even if this is not going to be suitable with the future of humanity, Yeah. The blurring is pretty huge in front of you.
Yeah. I mean,
Sorry
this stuff is hard. This stuff is hard. If folks here watched the American sitcom The Good Place, right, which is all about being an ethical person, there's that realization in season 2 or 3 where literally no one has been ethical in the calculation of The Good Place for 700 years. And when they unpacked it, it's oh, you can't be ethical in a kind of modern society. There's so many integrating counter forces that it's you can go crazy trying to figure out that stuff. It doesn't mean that we don't have to try. And I feel a little awkward, frankly, as a privileged, middle-aged, cis-het white man, to be the ethical leader. I've more recently, what I will say is I've been much more in tune with and trying to learn from. There's a kind of an emerging field of critical user experience. What was it called? Not human-centered design. Well, there's Destroyed by Design. There's the the workshop in St. Louis, the creative. I have to look it up, but equity-centered design. That's what the phrase. Equity-centered design. There's humanity-centered, which is run by Vivian Castillo and Alba Villamil, who practice critical user experience, who are really trying to open people's eyes to the fact that for the last 30 years, when we talk about user-centered design, the users we are talking about are primarily young white men who are capable, good eyes, good, no handicaps. We've been designing really well for a very narrow subset of society, and everyone else has been expected to just deal with it. And if it's not working for them, oh well. And now we're seeing with either critical UX, equity-centered design, inclusive design, right? So there's a whole inclusive design kind of movement. We're opening, trying to open up the aperture and the perspective and recognizing that the solutions that we have been creating and the methodologies that we've been practicing for 25, 30 years had a lot of privilege baked into them that at least I, as a white man, didn't realize. I'm this is great. I don't see for the longest time, I didn't see the problem. Everything was good for me. But we are becoming, I think, as a community, much more aware that there's a long way to go to create experiences, create services, create offerings that meet the full breadth of society and not just a narrow slice. Oh, it is.
It's the last one. You have responsibility.
Do you have one more Do you have one more question?
I have written down one.
Oh, did anybody else have a question? Because he's already asked. But if not, we'll let him ask again. Okay.
So ethics, I found it relatively easy because it's just about human-centered design. So yeah, those people are human too, right? That's the answer. So we should design for them too. But when ethics goes also on sustainability, then sustainability is about economy, social, and nature. So it's about having actually with humanity, it's about social. So it's more about actually making compromises of how human-centered, perfect for you as a human, a solution is for nature's sake. So how do you see that as a tension for?
I agree with the general kind of what you're putting out there. That's an order that I don't think at. It's just I can only go so far, it's just not something that I feel confident or comfortable. I can spout blah blah, but I don't have any depth of understanding with those issues. They're important. We should address them, but I'm not the expert. That you can ask me that. I don't have an answer. We should find someone who is deeper into that area to have better ideas than I ever would be able to come up with off the top of my head. It's just not something that I end up engaging in my practice.
Thanks for being candid.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. This has been great. I think I can stick around for one drink, and then I actually have to meet my family for dinner. But hopefully you'll all be able to just hang out with one another for a little while. And thank you, Raffaele. Thank you, Francesco. This has been fun. Woo!
Drinks upstairs.
Upstairs. Okay. I'll follow you. Product management in the work we do.